Hi, I'm Lynsey Harrison, and I'm the partner head of Clarion's Contentious Private Client team, and I'm joined today by Jeremy, who's a solicitor in the team. And today we're going to be discussing one of the important first steps in taking a challenge in relation to a will, and that's requesting medical records. So Jeremy, why is this such an important step?
So I suppose medical records can be quite a helpful source of information because when you're looking at capacity and other sort of validity issues, because if you're looking at GP notes, the records themselves, test results, that sort of thing can really shed quite a good light on whether someone did or did not have capacity at that relevant time. Also, other things that you might get from the medical records would be like the general health of that testator, and also any medication they're on, which equally could also impact on their capacity. So you want to know that information. And also other things that you might also see in the medical records is parts about their vulnerability. So there might be mention about whether they're vulnerable in certain particular ways, which again, and it always sounds the same thing, but again links to their capacity as well. So taken in the round, you can get quite a lot of information from medical records when you're looking at challenging wills.
It helps to really build up a picture, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
So once we have got those records, how can they then be used in the challenge?
So I suppose you might come across medical records being used in that initial correspondence. So if you're preparing for a claim, if you're preparing their letter of claim, you might want to include extracts of the medical records in that document. And equally, if you're doing a letter of response for a defendant, you might want to counter with medical records that you've obtained. After that, once the litigation, if it does develop further, you might want to consider obtaining a retrospective capacity assessment by a specialist expert who can then review the medical records and come to a conclusion on the balance of probabilities whether that person did or did not have capacity at the relevant time. So that could be really powerful, particularly if you want to sort of get the other side to a sort of negotiating position or trying to get a settlement, or just to really substantiate your claim. Having that sort of evidence from an expert can really take you quite far further forward.
And there was a recent case, wasn't there, Leonard and Leonard in 2024?
Yes, that's right.
And this issue came up.
Exactly, yeah, that's right. So that was quite an interesting case. So that was, in that actual case itself, the testator was held not to have capacity, and there were medical evidence, or medical experts rather, brought in to opine on whether that person had capacity, but the court was very clear that the medical evidence, although helpful, it's really for the court to determine whether that person has capacity, taking into account all of the relevant factors. So that medical expert evidence is only one of those factors, but the court's looking at everything in the round. So it sort of demonstrated that that evidence is still part of that process, but the court is the one that actually makes that determination. Yeah.
And who has the right to request these records?
So the right is given by Section 31F of the Access to Health Records Act 1990. So it's any person who has a claim arising out of the death of the patient has a right to claim their medical records. So it is quite a wide authority. It's not always recognised by when you're writing out these letters from the different. You have to sort of sometimes explain it a bit to say this is what we're basing it on, but it gives you quite that wide authority to start with.
A lot of clients think they're not able to do it, don't they? And we would do it for them.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And where do people need to send these requests?
So if you're requesting records from a GP surgery, which you often are, then you make that request to that surgery itself. If the surgery has closed, then you would make your request to Primary Care Support England. It used to be the case that you send all your requests there, but they've now changed that process. And if you're requesting records from a hospital, then you tend to write to the relevant NHS trust. And helpfully or unhelpfully, each sort of organisation has its own slightly different procedure and slightly different team you might contact. So you do have to sort of be slightly wary of how you actually do it. But the general principles are as we've discussed. Yeah.
And it's worth diarising those requests, isn't it? Because some of them can take a really long time.
Yes, no, definitely. I've had some dealt with in weeks, and others dealt with in months, and it's taken lots of chasing to get it from them. So yeah, definitely worth diarising just to remind yourself so you can push it along.
Yeah. And what about other types of records? Is there any other records that we get?
So social health records, social care records, they can be also very helpful if the deceased person had a social worker, although it's just worth flagging that process isn't dealt with under the Access to Health Records Act, so there's a separate process, so a separate sort of request that you would make. But yeah, definitely if those records exist, then that can also shed sort of light on that person's capacity at that time as well.
Thank you, that's really helpful. So to summarise, medical records are absolutely crucial in claims about capacity, lack of capacity and undue influence type challenges to the validity of a will.
Yes.
And are a really important part of the jigsaw that we put together to ascertain exactly what happened, aren't they? Thank you, Jeremy, that's really helpful.
No, my pleasure.
Thanks for explaining all of that.
No problem.
And as always, if you have any issues or any questions about this type of thing, please do get in touch. We'd be happy to help. Thank you.